World Combat Sports. Hello once again. Had to drop in and talk about the potential super fight that's looming in the midst. And who would be the first to provide you that cloud of precipitation? None other than myself. Following UFC 226, we had Daniel Comier stopping Stipe Miocic in the first round. We saw the crushing right hand that he caught Stipe with when he was trying to exit the clinch. And Stipe forgot to protect himself at all times, and he was knocked unconscious. Not to mention how Daniel Comier followed up with maybe 2 to 3 extra punches while Stipe was already knocked unconscious and thinking about tomorrow. The good thing is that Daniel Comier made history. He was the first light heavyweight champion and heavyweight champion to hold those titles simultaneously. The good thing about this is that it further solidifies Daniel Cormier's name in the history book as one of the all-time greats. It's no disputing that. But what my focus is today is we want to talk about the potential super fight. We want to talk about the grand creme de la creme of bouts that has to happen before Daniel Cormier retires from the sport of MMA. We're not talking about Daniel Cormier and Brock Lesnar. I'll be honest, and I'm going to get this out the way, sweep it to the side. When Daniel Cormier steps into the cage with Brock Lesnar, he's going to demolish Brock Lesnar, just like Alistair Overeem did, just like Frank Mir caught him with a leg lock. It's not going to be that much of a job for Daniel Cormier to disperse Brock Lesnar. Period. No matter what WWE scripted, going in there pushing and trying to create fan base. Look, the UFC fans are already seen it, been there, done that already. The Diaz brothers, they kicked it off and they did it for real. Wasn't no script to that. So let's be clear. Moving on. Let's talk about the potential super fight matchup. This is what I want to see. Let's give a little history on Daniel Cormier. A lot of individuals don't understand that he was once the champion in a Strikeforce World Heavyweight Grand Prix. Now you have to understand how tough that is. And when he came on the scene, people understood who he was from his Olympic caliber wrestling. Okay, one of those guys who kind of always said he came up short in getting the grand prize. Not that night. Not the night that he knocked out Stipe Miocic, when he caught him with a crushing right hand on the exit, not protecting himself from the clinch, and put him to sleep. And just to add a little bit of coins to the bag of gold that he had already established, that he could have just picked up and left the cage, he crushed him with 2 or 3 punches while he was unconscious. Now, he is 21-1 with no contest. Okay, that no contest came from John Bones Jones testing positive. All right, but you look at his record in Strikeforce, he was 14-0 at heavyweight. He's the truth. Daniel Cormier is dispersed of 5 previous UFC champions, that being Bigfoot Silva, Alexander Gustafsson, Dan Henderson, Roy Nelson, Anthony Johnson twice, and Fedor Emelianenko. If you look at that perspective, he is no way, shape, or form to be argued as being one of the all-time greats. He is in that conversation, people. But then again, you look at the other name that's always looming in the midst when Daniel Cormier's name is mentioned is John Jones, Johnny Bones Jones. He is the truth. There's no mistaking that identity. Those two have a connection. John Jones has stepped in the cage and defeated Daniel Cormier twice. And I know the second time was embroiled in controversy. But when it comes down to skill set, when it comes down to that second fight, when Daniel Cormier attempted to block a low kick, maybe to the kidney, and John Bones Jones went over the top and checked him right off the temple with a shin kick, stunned him close the distance as Daniel Cormier stumbled to the cage, and he went over there and landed some strikes, and the fight was called. Look, of course, there's been controversy with John Jones. But these two have to step in the cage before Daniel Comier retires. It has to happen. The reason why I'm saying this, he made it perfectly clear, he being Comier, that next year, 2019, March, his 40th birthday, he was planning on closing the curtains to a glorious, spectacular career, phenomenal achievement to his resume. All right? So there's no way we can take that away. We already know he's in the conversation, in the pantheon of MMA fighters. But it's one particular disparity that he has to close. It's one particular seam in his career that he has to take care of, and that is with his nemesis, Jon Jones. This is what this whole discussion is about. This is what I'm trying to gather. There's no way that DC can be absolutely satisfied with all his accomplishments, having his name attached to those two losses to Jon Jones. He has to go back, maybe fight someone in between now and 2019, okay, at heavyweight division. For what it's worth, it's going to be Brock Lesnar, and make no mistake about it, that's going to get done over quick in a hurry. But when it comes to Jon Bones Jones, let's go over his pro record. 22-1. All right, 22-1. Jon Jones has never been defeated. The one on his record is when he was absolutely demolishing Matt Hamill, who they was touting him to go in here and put work in against a community college wrestler versus a wrestler who's a 3-time national, 2-time world champion wrestler. This guy was the one to go in there and test Jon Jones, and it was quite the opposite. Jon Jones put on a masterful display. His skill set was superior to that of Matt Hamill, and by the time he was on the cusp of defeating Matt Hamill, in the adrenaline rush of him landing strikes while fully mounted, he landed what is considered a 12-6 elbow. Now let me discuss a little bit about what a 12-6 is. No one in MMA came up, brought this to the surface, anchored it, and said, you know what? We need to get rid of this because of what I seen in the previous fight. We need to get rid of this because of what happened to this particular fighter. We see certain type of strikes in MMA in general that are brutal, especially if it's been a tough fight. There's blood everywhere, the fighters are cut open, and it's been grueling from the opening bell. But this wasn't the case. A discussion arose, right, with these doctors, these people who sit on the boards, the commissioners. They was having a conversation, and they had actually seen a 12-6 elbow in an ice-breaking competition. And that set with them in a way that they say, well, if they can break blocks of ice with a 12-6 elbow, there's no way that this should be included in the striking arsenal as legal in the UFC or MMA, primarily the UFC. So they took it out, they extracted it, they fought for it. And John McCarthy, if you ever listen to his his video on explaining that detail, he was actually there trying to explain to them the case, and he was trying to voice his case enough to the point of someone who knows a lot more than these guys that's sitting in the chairs of the commission, that there's a lot more severity that's going on with these strikes than the 12-6 elbow. But the guy was the one who absolutely persuaded the decision, was adamant that these 12-6 elbows have to go away. We have to basically eliminate them from being a legal tool in a fighter's set of strikes, of arsenals, skill set that they're able to use and make it applicable to their offense on another fighter. So during that time, Jon Bones Jones was fully mounted and striking Matt Hamill. Already he had hit him with over 20-25 strikes already while fully mounted. And yes, some of those were blocked. But when you talk about that 12-6 elbow that came down, it was no way, shape, or form, people, that Matt Hamill was basically exiting the position. If the fight wouldn't have stopped from a 12-6, it would have been a more of a bludgeon than it was before. And Steve Mazzagatti, who stopped the fight from the 12-6 elbow, he would have stopped it later on. But now he has something to latch on to. When he stopped the fight, Jon Jones believed that he had won. And when the actual announcement came over that he was disqualified, he was in shock. So when they spoke to Matt Hamill initially, post-fight, he said his shoulder was hurt. He hurt his shoulder, and he basically gave praise to Jon Jones for fighting an incredible fight, and he was a good fighter. But he hurt his shoulder, and he couldn't continue. But the one thing about the whole stoppage was Matt Hamill was busted up. Probably his nose was broken and everything else. Who's to say, he couldn't have carried on. He was a very tough fighter at the time, but Jones made him look like he was on a whole different 5 levels up when it came to striking. It was just an absolute lopsided beating that took place that night. But let's bring this back. Let's repel it back to what I was speaking on earlier about Comier and Jones. This fight needs to happen to get clarification as who's the best in the UFC, bar none. No other comparisons. We need to see this. And the reason why we need to see it is because there is a history, fight fans, between these two. And the history says, well, guess what? He defeated Daniel Cormier the first time. No ifs, fans, okay? We know it. The second time, he defeated him too. But post-fight, due to the testing, he pissed dirty. Now he's suspended, actively suspended out of the UFC. During that time, Comier has made a verbal, and he should be now. He has no problem with doing this. He has made it perfectly clear that he's did everything right. He's been the active fighter, and he should get his just due and credibility. And yes, Daniel, you should. When it comes over and turn that page, you know that the bookmarker is there. That bookmarker is Jon Jones. And we should never forget, DC, that is a fighter that you should take the bookmarker out, close that chapter by stepping in the cage once more for a super fight. Winner takes all. Period. It should be a super fight between these two. I've seen it all across the social media, MMA networks, the platforms, the outlets. Everyone is basically speaking that if DC is going to proclaim that he's ready to close the curtains on a historic Hall of Fame career, there's one opponent when his suspension has expired, upon his return, rates the right. Yes, I use rate because he's arguably one of the best MMA fighters in the UFC and in the world, hands down. So there's a decision to make here. I'm pretty sure Dana White wants to make the decision because he was a Jon Jones fan until he popped dirty again. The last fight when DC fought Jon Jones, the fans was cheering for the villain in Jones. Well, what's not to like about DC? He's been doing everything right, man. He wrestled at a high level. He's came in here and fought and campaigned at a weight class just because of his dear friend Cain Velasquez. They would not have to fight each other or have any type of encounter in a sport that they're making their livelihood from. And even though his good friend Cain Velasquez has been out of the sport for quite some time now, he's just only at this point chose to move up and fight a heavyweight for Stipe Miocic. And he did a very superb job. Impeccable timing, caught him with a right, and finished it. Now brings me to this conversation that many people are bantering forever and a day post-fight. They're going to give DC his accolade, is well deserving Understand that, fight fans. It is well deserving. There's no way to basically put an argument up that his credentials, his resume, his performances have all been superb. You cannot take that away. He's been in there with the likes of Roy Nelson, Frank Mir, Dan Henderson, John Jones twice. He subbed Anthony Rumble Johnson twice. He had an all-out brawl with a much larger fighter than Alexander Gustafsson, and he just tossed him around like it was just another suitcase that he had to carry to the gym. Believe me when I tell you. And then he fought Anderson Silva, who is considered an all-time great in his weight class at middleweight. And then you have his previous opponent. Not to mention, we're just excluding Volkan Ozdemir because Ozdemir, he had that little bitty flame just like a lot of these fighters. And when he ran into someone at the caliber of Comier, he folded easily by punches in the second round. Okay? I think around the 2-minute mark. But Stipe Miocic was a legitimate contender in the heavyweight division for Comier to put as a notch on his resume, and he did so in devastating fashion. And at one point in time, when you saw the memes of him crying post-fighter John Jones, it wasn't enough. It wasn't a time that you just couldn't look on there and find it going viral. Now you're seeing memes out there with him face to face with an unconscious Stipe Miocic. And that is something Miocic is going to have to deal with. But he's a strong guy. He seems like he comes off as this guy who's very mentally stable, strong-minded, and don't let too much bother him, man. He went in there with good intentions as the heavyweight champion. He's legitimate. He's a future Hall of Famer. He's one of the best heavyweight champions to reign in the UFC. But this particular night wasn't his night. It just wasn't. So what I'm advocating to the fight fans, I'm advocating that you push for John Jones to come off suspension. You can hate him all you want, but if you're out here hating John Jones, I can give you a laundry list that you can wash every night of potential fighters or previous fighters that have tested dirty and the fans still cheer. There's plenty. You have the Vitor Belforts. You have the Chris Cyborgs. You have the Brock Lesnars. You have a list of fighters who have tested positive and still came back to fight. This is the Hurt Business. And it's forgiven in his own way if you're not a repeat offender. John Jones is currently suspended. Anderson Silva, who is considered the ATG, was suspended. You have to look at all those variables and say, who do I support? You just can't sit up here and point the finger and excoriate these fighters who have tested positive for a banned substance and just negate their entire career like they're trying to do John Jones. It's unfair. Very, very unfair. So I look at it this way. We the fans need to be extremely vociferous in how we call and put the echo out in the MMA community over the media scrum, and let it be known that we want to see this super fight. We want to see it. Comier is obviously a better version of himself at heavyweight, and he's shown that. He seems to have more strength. He doesn't have to basically deplete that much weight to the point where it's an extremely stipulated weight cut, and he's barely able to step on the scale and make weight, happen to strip down. It's very tough for somebody who's actually like eating and like campaigning at heavyweight. He said he walks around at 238. So can you imagine him cutting down to 205? Could you imagine that? But now, Comier have set a March 2019 as his date to close the curtains on his career. That is it. But no. It's one left. It's one left that we have to make our voices known. That we need to see this super fight between Comier and Jones. Is Comier in the pantheon of all-time greats? Will he be treated as a combatant that has achieved the utmost hierarchy in the sport of MMA? He has. As John Jones did the same, even though he was the youngest champion, that accolade. Also, he achieved the light heavyweight championship. Him being suspended does not negate his accomplishments, and we cannot sit up here and just put a trumpet to that every time his name come up. He is legitimate, people. So I'm going to close this out with just a little bit of comparisons as to why this bout should happen. Why the bout should happen. Let's go over the competition, the resume, the victims, the ones who have faltered under the pressure, who have came up on the losing end when they stepped in the cage with John Bones Jones, Stephen Bonner, Matt Hamill, Brandon Vera, Ryan Bader, Mauricio Shogun Rua, Quentin Rampage Jackson, Loyola Machida, Sugar Rashad Evans, Vitor Belfort, Chael Sonnen, Alexander Gustafsson, Glover Teixeira, Daniel Comier, Ovince St. Preux, and once again, for the second time, his no contest to Daniel Comier. I've went over DC's record, his resume, and I just gave you that of John Bones Jones. You're talking about 15 quality opponents. That's twice as much as the quality opponents that can be comparable to that of Daniel Comier. I'm going to leave you with the obvious. If you're a true fanatic of the fight fan, the combat sport enthusiast, let's voice this fight into fruition. Bring it to the surface. Bring it to the point where if you're blogging, if you're making comments, if you're on these live threads, we need to see this super fight. It is absolutely a phenomenal matchup. We've seen them in the cage previously, but guess what? It was never for the winner takes all. We are talking about Daniel now has more medals to his name to make this bout even more worthy to be seen a third time. This time it's going to be at heavyweight. Heavyweight. Did you hear what I just said? This time the bout needs to be campaigned at heavyweight, because Daniel Comier, he ain't lost at heavyweight. John Jones needs to step back in the cage and get this work from Daniel at heavyweight. No more cutting down to light heavy. No more weight, strenuous weight cuts, depleting his strength, cardio, whatever. Because Daniel has never had a problem with cardio, but just the point of him cutting down to 205 and then headed back up on fight night 225, 230. That's absolutely crazy. So there you go, fight fans. I said it. I've kind of made my points as to how this should go down. I hope all the voices out there in the world, in the global MMA fan community, the communal of fanatics that I know that are listening, be sure to tune in to World Combat Sports. Please follow me on all social media outlets, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and my YouTube channel. Help grow World Combat Sports. One fight, one team. I truly appreciate it. Salute. And we will talk again. Be sure to turn up and tune in.